scorching heat and extreme drought, far-flung places in bitter cold. Nature dishes out wild contrasts. But nothing can survive without water. It determines where to live, what's on the menu, and how to raise the babies. Drought and flood dictate life or death. Specialization and adaptability, they're what it takes to endure life at the limits. The tropical paradise of Sri Lanka is surrounded by the Indian Ocean. It is an island of water. Inland, thousands of natural lakes join tens of thousands of reservoirs and canals built to irrigate the fields more than 2,000 years ago. Every year, Sri Lanka experiences not just one, but two monsoons. Enormous amounts of rain drench the country, and yet severe periods of drought make the reservoirs essential. Would the people who built them have ever dreamed that their work would not only survive the millennia, but also help countless native animals survive? The recent rains have filled the rivers and ponds. It's a time of plenty. Won't last. As drought progresses, the lush grass begins to wilt and former lakes transform into marshy ponds. Mugger crocodiles wallow in the mud. Painted storks linger defiantly in their midst. And so do the wild water buffalo. Is this neighborhood as peaceful as it seems? As long as the ponds teem with fish, other creatures have nothing to fear from the crocodiles. The sun now burns mercilessly from a cloudless sky. Food and drinking water grow scarce. The experienced matriarch leads her family on a search for fresh water. Others remain as the region continues to grow drier and drier. Sri Lanka's elephants have a long journey ahead. As they go, they meet other herds. All share one common goal. A huge reservoir, 2,000 years old, built by the kings of a bygone age, now used by Sri Lanka's wildlife. At the Minaria tank, Asia's largest known group of wild elephants gather. Some 300 of these grey giants congregate here each year to enjoy the cool water. And to savour the fresh grass. Young bulls compete playfully. All in a landscape created by nature and shaped by man. Hundreds of shipwrecks lie off the Atlantic coast of Namibia. They too were made by man, but have been conquered by the forces of nature. They are witnesses to the wild and deadly power of the sea. The shoreline marks the threshold of the vast Namib, one of our planet's rare coastal deserts, a dry, windy, and climatically extreme region. Although seemingly deserted, this place is home to a great number of creatures. But at temperatures of more than 35 degrees Celsius in the shade, life in the Namib isn't easy. And yet, the same ocean current that puts ships in harm's way also supplies this desert with water. From time to time, the trade wind carries humid coastal air inland. Then fog covers the desert. The mornings are cool, and humidity condenses on the plants. As if it had rained. Giraffes gracefully sip these rare, refreshing drops, and at this height, they don't have many competitors. But that precious moisture won't last long. The giraffes will have to find another source of water in the middle of the seemingly powder-dry Namib. It's a struggle shared by many. A freshwater spring in the middle of the desert. Whoever finds their way here has struck gold because the water flows all year round. Sand grouse travel as far as 60 kilometers in one day to get here. By dipping their breast feathers in the cool water, they can transport the valuable cargo to the chicks in their nest. But where birds flock, predators lurk. The oasis is their hunting ground. This time, the birds of prey only manage to raise a ruckus. The giraffes rise above it. Order's restored when the oryxes arrive. There's no question about who's first in line here. The strongest animals drink their fill before the weaker ones get their turn. Sometimes they forget their place and need a reminder. This hungry raptor has come for the food. And an inattentive grouse fits the bill. Another Namib resident is known for its exceptional vigilance. At least one member of the meerkat family always stands lookout while the others search for food. Safety, food and water are what it takes to survive. Where there's no water to be found, these desert dwellers have come up with a different survival strategy. Luckily, maggots, beetles and scorpions have one crucial thing in common. They are extraordinarily juicy. The meerkats' search for this succulent food keeps them busy practically round the clock. Just as the insects enable them to survive here, the meerkats fill the bellies of foxes, snakes and jackals. And they never let their guard down, because danger can come from anywhere. A Cape fox who ventures too close to the compound triggers an alarm. The family knows the drill and makes a speedy getaway. The landscape of northern Mexico is barren and dry. It's the home of the Tarahumara people, who have lived in the Copper Canyon region for hundreds of years. Originally, they cultivated corn and beans, but now the mountain farmers also breed goats, chickens and sheep. Families, crops and livestock all demand water. However, except during the rainy season, water is scarce here. The nearest source at the foot of the canyon takes a long and arduous trek. During dry periods, the Tarahumara make the descent twice a week to gather enough for the crops, the animals, and the people. When they finally reach the bottom, the villagers do more than just replenish their supplies. The men fish in the river, laundry gets washed, and they take time to enjoy a meal and a drink. Everyone collects as much water as they can carry up the steep ravine. Despite the hardships, the Tarahumara people do not want to give up their isolated way of life. This is where their ancestors lived, and tradition is important to them. Speaking of tradition, today is a day of great celebration, and the corn beer is ready. The normally reserved Tarahumara celebrate, dance and sing. This is a day for everyone to have a good time. Twice a year, the Tarahumara people celebrate here, in the high plains of Mexico, to express gratitude to their god. The festivities hold the hope that the celebration will also yield some much-needed rain. Even in places where water at first seems plentiful, sometimes supplies run short. The bromeliads in America's wetland forests have developed a solution. Thanks to their exposed location on the branches of tall trees, the plants absorb a great deal of sunlight. But their roots don't reach the ground, where most other plants get water and nutrients. To compensate, the leaves of many bromeliad species form a well in the center of the plant. It fills with water when it rains, and also traps falling leaves that decompose and release nutrients for the plant. And some use it as their own private pool. The long-awaited rain can be too much of a good thing. When violent storms sweep across North America, some plants are left to sink or swim. Normally, the lid of the parrot pitcher plant prevents too much rain from collecting in the trap of this flesh-eating plant. However, heavy rainfall can inundate their marshy habitat. Even the lid can't prevent the plant from sinking. But drowning is not a death sentence, and the carnivorous plant won't starve underwater. The lid forms a narrow tube with tiny hairs pointing downwards. Tadpoles eat the layer of algae that forms on the submerged plant, but one wrong move can be the tadpole's last. Its path leads the tadpole deeper and deeper into the tube, and to its doom. In the Amazon rainforest, many residents also have to adapt to a sudden overabundance of water. Even creatures that live among the branches and rarely leave their lofty perches. Three-toed sloths. A sloth mother and her baby feast contentedly on the prolific green leaves within easy grasp. The sloth's anatomy is optimized for a leisurely life in the treetops. On the ground, they seem a little awkward. But as the water rises and submerges some branches, the sloth's regular routes become impassable. To reach the next juicy batch of leaves, the sloths have no choice. They'll have to swim. And they're better at it than one would expect, and not as slow as their name implies. This nimble adult reaches the next tree with her baby safely in tow. And fresh leaves are there for the taking. When the rainy season is over in the Brazilian Amazon, the water level, which temporarily transformed the rainforest into an oversized lake, sinks once more. All the residents who swam far and wide during the flood must find their way back to safer waters. To this end, some fish perform a true feat of strength. They slide from puddle to puddle across the last of the wet leaves. In constant pursuit of water. Some fish take it to extremes. They catapult themselves through the air with their powerful tail muscles as they race against the changing conditions. Being in the right place at the right time, that's something the terns on the banks of the Amur have mastered. When the water level drops following the spring flood, countless sand islands poke out of the floodwaters. This is exactly what the terns have been waiting for. Building a nest on these sand islands ensures that the eggs are well protected from wild boar, foxes, and raccoon dogs. Each year, the terns lay just 1 to 3 eggs per clutch, which they guard like a precious treasure. But a sand island is no paradise. The inexperienced or unwise find out soon enough. A nest built too close to the waves means that all the work was in vain. Freshly hatched chicks must learn quickly to walk and fly, because the next flood will inundate the sand island. A wandering chick has to be on his guard, even against fellow terns. Tern parents consider their neighbors' babies a threat. This chick is fortunate and survives the attack. Rather than rely on perfect timing, the salt marsh sparrows on the American Atlantic coast use architecture to help assure their chicks will hatch. Here in the salt marshes, water and land converge. Anyone who settles here has to contend with hazards from both. The salt marsh sparrow builds its nest near the ground. It hardly seems the ideal nesting place, considering that the entire area is regularly flooded during high tide. On the other hand, the tall grass makes the nest virtually invisible to predators. When building the nest, the salt marsh sparrow takes precautions. Above the nest, the sparrow constructs a dome of grass. When the water rises, the eggs might roll around a little, but the dome ensures that they remain safely tucked away in the nest. the flood, the mother warms the eggs up again, and soon she has a brood of squeaking chicks to look after. In the salt marshes, the difference between fruitful brooding and tragic failure can be just a few centimeters. But the price of success is immeasurable. Good time management skills are important for these oceanic reptiles. Sea turtles. Six or seven species make their home in our oceans. They spend most of their lives in the water and travel enormous distances every year. But sea turtles move between two worlds, dependent both on water and on land. Regardless of species, every female sea turtle lays her eggs on the same beach where she hatched. And she doesn't return there alone. Most sea turtles lay their eggs at the same time. Once the perfect spot has been found, the turtle uses her flippers to dig a deep pit in which she'll lay dozens of soft-shelled eggs. An exhausting task, using flippers designed for the sea. Once her eggs are well hidden in the sand, where they'll be warmed by the sun, she returns to the sea. The hard work is done, and she'll never see the result of her labors. While the turtles are only visitors to the beaches of Sri Lanka, the stilt fishermen are regulars, returning to the beach day after day, or rather to the water. Their fishing technique is about 70 years old. It began when the fishing spots on the rocks became overcrowded. The fishermen moved closer to the fish and right into the sea. Over much of the year, daily fishing provides an important source of food for the anglers. But there aren't many stilt fishermen anymore. The last remaining ones perch for hours, day in and day out, at sunrise and sunset, in this place so unusual for humans and so indisputably extreme. Back at the beach, the decisive night for the turtles has arrived. Since an entire generation of sea turtles hatches almost simultaneously, the beach will soon be swarming with activity. The little ones hatch at night and let the moon guide them to the sea, their new home. Nocturnal hatching means a better chance of survival for the young turtles. Temperatures are lower and fewer predators are on the prowl, because once the turtles hatch, it's a race against time. Hunters are sure to appear first thing in the morning, looking to turn a little turtle into the perfect breakfast treat. Scientists estimate that even if a turtle reaches the sea, its chance of survival is about 1 in 1,000. But every single hatchling provides hope for its endangered species. The Wadabe, a nomadic people in Niger, lead a lifestyle that seems worlds apart from modern ways, and it crosses the frontiers between society and autonomy. With their livestock, their most important possession, and all their belongings, the Wadabe live constantly on the move. Occasionally, they trade their goods at the market and then continue their journey through the vast expanses of Niger. But even nomads don't lead a completely self-sufficient existence. It's not always easy to get water in Niger, especially during the dry season. For the Wadabe, everything revolves around the welfare of the herd, and for this, they need plenty of water. Many of the local wells are owned by the Tuareg, and centuries of animosity separate the Tuareg and the Wadabe. Negotiating access to this vital resource often requires no small amount of diplomacy. Success. The Wadabe have permission to use the well. Both man and beast refresh themselves, and the Wadabe collect as much water as possible before they move on, because no one can say when and where they'll find the next well. Although the nomadic life isn't easy, the Wadabe have no desire to settle down. This is their way of life. The zebra in the dry zone of Botswana, the Makadikadi, are the nomads of the desert. Thousands of years ago, a huge lake covered the region. When it dried up, it left giant salt deserts. Thousands of zebra inhabit this barren landscape. Not until the next rainy season, when enough nourishing grass finally grows, will the zebra mares give birth here. For now, fresh grass is getting scarce, forcing the zebra to migrate. They travel more than 4,000 kilometers per year. Their destination, the Boteti River in the western part of the country. The fresh water offers a welcome change after days of drought and salty tufts of grass. But they can't stay long. Even this abundance of fresh grass can't stand up to the likes of 20,000 hungry zebra. And the overgrown riverbanks hide threats. Lions roam here, not exactly the perfect neighborhood. As soon as the rainy season arrives, the zebra will return to the salt desert. Now, water and fresh food revitalize this place that was nothing but wasteland during the drought. Back in the Makadikadi, the circle of life comes around, welcoming a new generation of zebra. In just a few months, they will begin their first big migration. When the rainy season ends, they too will head west to the banks of the Boteti. The dunes of Lensois, encompassing 1,500 square kilometers in northeastern Brazil. Even in this place, there is life, though sometimes well hidden. Catching prey here requires an extraordinarily good nose. The armadillo can sniff out prey buried 20 centimeters deep in the sand. And when the rain finally comes, nature performs something that, at first glance, seems like a miracle. The rainfall causes the groundwater level to rise. Combined with the extra water from above, shimmering turquoise lagoons emerge, filled to the brim with flourishing new life. Insects and even fish populate the pools, which just hours before did not even exist. Catching the scent of the fresh water, dune dwellers who managed to survive the hot period by staying buried in the cool sand now venture out. No one can resist the turquoise lagoons. Time to wake up. It's a long way to the water. Just one more reason to hurry. The waters of the lagoon beckon everyone. Finally, they make it. Those who can dive into the miniature lake, bathing and swimming in this temporary tropical resort in the heart of a Brazilian desert. They'll enjoy it while they can, before it disappears. Then the cycle will start anew, a world holding its breath until the next rain makes life blossom again. Life at the limits in this world of extremes. Whether heat or drought, exposure or bitter cold, life endures even under the most extreme conditions. In every environment, temperature plays a critical role for the inhabitants. It dictates their activity, what they have to eat, and how they raise their young. Life and death is a matter of degrees at the whim of heat and cold. And evolution never fails to answer the demands of life at the limits. Along the equator, the sun imposes its relentless, inexorable power. The residents of the rainforest find ways to thrive under its searing gaze. As the day wears on, the heat only intensifies. That's why, in the canopy of leaves, the early morning bustles with activity. On the Indonesian island of Sumatra, orangutans have been busy picking fruit since sunrise. Knowing when each tree bears fruit takes a great deal of experience and a sharp memory. The lofty world of the rainforest treetops is so complex that it takes a young orangutan 9 years to learn from its mother what it needs to know to survive. Aside from humans, no other primate species takes longer to reach adulthood. Of all primates, orangutans spend the most time in the trees. This newborn will spend the next 5 decades among the canopy. But first, she must master the art of getting safely from branch to branch. Steadily, relentlessly, the heat penetrates the shady leaves. Before it gets unbearable, the orangutans must gather as much fruit as possible. It's just before noon. The heat is stifling. Everyone has fled for shelter now. The canopy grows still. The orangutans climb deeper into the branches for a siesta. In their sleeping nests, they wait for the worst of the sweltering heat to pass. The largest orangutan male in the area settles in. But despite the oppressive temperature, one female's feeling a different kind of heat. She doesn't have any offspring yet. Maybe this is her chance to change that. Under the scorching midday sun and with a belly full of figs, this male is not warming to the task. Orangutans spend most of their lives in solitude. encounters like these are rare. This is a big moment for her. But despite her most sultry and seductive moves, the even more sultry air defeats her. The male has only one desire, for the sun to set, and that might take a while. But for some animals, extreme heat can inspire some ingenious problem solving. In the sunburned desert of Namibia, the last drops of water have literally vanished into thin air. You'd think thirsty herbivores wouldn't last a day here. Especially not water-loving elephants. These old, experienced bulls know differently. They recall exactly where to find what they need to survive. Things are looking up for the elephant. Juicy plants are in high demand in the Namib. Low-growing greens don't last long. Even with their trunks outstretched, this elephant comes up short. But that's only a minor setback. It just takes some ingenuity. Even in these harsh conditions, he manages to eat a balanced meal. But there's a downside too. Not everyone can reach those tasty leaves. As soon as he pulls off a branch, uninvited dinner guests show up. Sure, they're family, but he doesn't want to share his supper. Well, maybe just this once. Then the rest of the herd approaches, and suddenly there's nothing left. Desert elephant mothers nurse their young for 7 years, much longer than the elephants of the savannah. That's the cost of living in the bone-dry Namib desert. As oppressive as the heat can be, the cold can be just as brutal and demand a different set of survival skills. Low temperatures change the nature of things on every level. Ice creeps across the landscape like a spell, blocking access to food for months at a time. November in Canada's Yukon Territory, an ice scape at the 66th parallel, the Arctic Circle. Every river frozen solid. Except for one, a trickle of hope in a desolate landscape. Springs in the riverbed keep the lifeline flowing. This makes it possible for chum salmon to advance as far as the upper reaches. During their migration, they travel a particularly long distance and spawn much later than fellow members of their species in other rivers. By the time they've reached the end of their journey, they've used the last of their strength, making them easy prey. Like the salmon and the river, these grizzlies are different from the rest of their kind. While others have started hibernating long ago, they're still active. Thanks to the ice-free river, these grizzlies have more time to build up their fat reserves. The voracious grizzlies devour huge quantities of salmon. To add just 2 kilograms of body weight, they need to eat 40 kilograms of fish per day. In just a few weeks, the diet of fatty fish transforms the bear's appearance. These bears brave temperatures down to minus 20 degrees Celsius. Their dense, well-insulated coat collects icicles. The indigenous people called them armored bears, believing their arrows couldn't penetrate the thick layer of ice. They rarely hunted the bears on this stretch of the river. Usually grizzly bears are loners, but up to 40 gather here to take advantage of the late salmon migration. The First Nations people revered this stretch of the river as a holy place that they honoured and protected. Because this was the only place where food was never scarce, even during the Arctic winter. Many who learned of this place realized that this miracle of nature must be preserved. Once, legends ensured its protection. Today, this region is a national park. At some point, even the longest of winters comes to an end. The Amur River on the Russian-Chinese border was locked in ice for half a year, along with its countless tributaries, lakes and swamps. Now the river breaks free from the torpor of winter. A strong current gnaws at the edges of the first cracks. Here and there, the ice begins to shift. Slowly, but with irresistible force, the river lifts it. Then suddenly the enormous rigid blanket shatters. The Amur, several kilometers wide and thousands long, shakes free of its burden. Temperatures can fluctuate dramatically in many environments, demanding a great deal from their inhabitants. In the mountain forests of South America, the nights and the early morning hours can be bitterly cold. Under such conditions, butterflies cannot fly. Insects, being cold-blooded, depend on the temperature of their surroundings. The coolness of the morning makes them sluggish, unable to do their job. For instance, pollinating flowers. Hummingbirds are warm-blooded. They produce their own body heat and can function even at low temperatures. They can get a head start on the pollination work before the day warms up. In return, hummingbirds are rewarded with nectar, which contains an impressive amount of fuel. Evolution has reduced the hummingbird's size and weight to minimize its energy consumption during flight. On the other hand, the length of their beaks and tongues has increased to provide better access to nectar. To reduce their weight, evolution has also scaled down their legs so much that hummingbirds can't jump or walk, only perch. Every day, a hummingbird drinks more than its own weight in nectar. The plants they pollinate produce huge amounts of the sweet liquid. To convert it into energy, these small creatures have an enormous oxygen demand, the highest of all vertebrates. Their wings beat up to 80 times per second. When perching, the bird's heart beats about 400 times per minute. Even during normal flight, the pulse rate rises to an incredible 1,200 beats per minute. That's 20 heartbeats per second. But even that's not always enough. When a hummingbird hovers, its heart expands to pump more blood with every beat. The blood flows from the heart to the lungs, back to the heart, to the muscles, and back to the heart again in less than a second. The hummingbird's small size and fast metabolism show how nature sometimes goes to extremes to adapt an animal to its environment. Warm-blooded animals face a constant challenge to find enough fuel, especially if they're large or use a power-sapping means of locomotion, or both. The Cape vulture needs to mobilize massive forces to overcome gravity. Particularly when flying on a full stomach. Vultures don't find such a feast every day, so they have to seize the opportunity when they can. After the banquet, liftoff can be tricky. It's a long way up. Cape vultures prefer to dwell in steep cliffs, which makes takeoff easier. The height provides another labor-saving feature that relies on temperature. The sun heats the surface of the Earth unevenly, especially among mountains. Warmer air can sweep upward in a strong flow called a thermal. The vultures simply ride the wind, gliding effortlessly on the thermals. They had it figured out long before we did. Harnessing the power of the thermals, vultures can hang glide for hours while hardly flapping their wings. They ascend up to 3,000 meters and fly hundreds of kilometers. On the ground, thermal energy also plays a role. This swamp pine forest in the US state of Georgia is one of the most diverse ecosystems in North America. But that diversity is fueled by danger. Because these forests often catch fire. Yet the flames are not just a force of destruction, they also rejuvenate this habitat. As the dense brush burns, it thins out the undergrowth, creating room for new trees. The large pine trees resist the heat and flames. The animals here are not so fortunate. For many, it's a death trap. But not for the gopher tortoise. This crafty creature digs a deep cave in the sandy soil. As soon as the tortoise smells smoke, it heads for cover. Its tunnel can be up to 12 meters long and 3 meters deep, and the tortoise builds it only as wide as he is long, just enough room to turn around. A single tortoise builds up to 35 of these caves on its territory. They provide a public service for other forest dwellers. Rattlesnakes find the nearest tortoise burrow to wait out the inferno. The tiny Florida mouse also seeks shelter here and risks being devoured by the snake. But in light of the circumstances, it's a chance he's willing to take. More than 350 species of animals find their way to the tortoise caves, and not just when there's a forest fire. This scarab beetle lives here permanently and keeps the cave clean. The gracious host scarcely seems to mind. Since gopher tortoises are herbivores, the guest feels safe in its home. Just as the fire is both a creator and destroyer, the tortoise, while looking after itself, becomes the unwitting savior of the forest creatures. But not every animal shies away from fire. On the islands of Southeast Asia, powerful volcanic forces have created bizarre new landscapes. Survival here demands some truly staggering adaptations. One of the most surprising was pulled off by an otherwise inconspicuous bird. You can't tell by looking, but these birds hatched from an active volcano. This is a danger zone. Tremors rock the earth and the air hangs heavy with toxic gases. But these megapodes make the best of a bad situation. Dozens of these chicken-like birds gather every morning on the mountainside of this fire and ash spewing volcano. The volcano can reach an incinerating 1,000 degrees, so the birds need to tread lightly to find a spot that's more suitable. That's not easy, so competition is fierce. The megapodes use their sturdy feet to dig deep into the ashes. They search for spots with just the right temperature, 33 degrees Celsius. These birds have amazingly accurate built-in thermometers, probably an organ on their throats. The birds can detect temperature differences of just half a degree Celsius. They're real sticklers for precision. They have to be. Their future depends on correct temperature measurement. They place their eggs deep in the warm volcanic ash. What happens next is left to fate and to the volcano, which they trust to incubate the eggs. In 9 weeks, the chicks will hatch, one of the longest incubation periods among birds. A few more scoops of ashes on top, and the megapode completes its parental duties. The megapodes search for temperature equilibrium in a steaming volcanic cauldron. But all over the planet, nature depends on climate's delicate balance. And lately, that balance is going increasingly off-kilter. The effects of global warming can be seen most clearly at the poles. In the last few decades, the average air temperature in the Arctic has risen about twice as rapidly as the average global temperature. North of the Arctic Circle, ever larger areas of sea ice are disappearing or forming later in the year. Glaciers too are in retreat. Greenland's ice sheet is shrinking by several 100 billion tons every year. The melting of the Greenland ice sheet is the world's single leading cause of the sea level rise. Researchers continue to apply new methods to try to understand these dramatic trends. In this research station in the middle of Greenland, scientists investigate what happens to the kilometre-thick ice layer when more and more meltwater flows through it. As temperatures rise, water runs across the glacier. The streams disappear into the ice sheet through so-called glacier mills.
Hi Will, I found an awesome mullah here. You should come over. It's about 150 meters
The scientists
deep.
want to find out to what extent this flowing water speeds the melting of the glacier or set parts of the ice sheet in motion.
A few ropes, 100+ meters over.
Because the meltwater currents vanish inside the glacier, researchers have only one way to trace them. They must descend to the interior of the ice, an extremely risky mission. One wrong step and the stream will sweep the climber under the ice sheet and straight into a gigantic labyrinth of raging ice water torrents. Scientists aren't the only ones who have to develop new responses to global warming. Wildlife in the polar regions is also beginning to adapt and transform. Orcas, or killer whales, are advancing into the Arctic Ocean. Until now, the sea ice has kept them away. Orcas avoid closed ice surfaces because they have to surface in order to breathe. But with the disappearance of the ice, they have free rein and can move ever further north. Already, several herds of orcas migrate every summer from the West Atlantic to the Arctic. They wouldn't make the journey if they didn't have a reason. Narwhal are on their way to the bays and estuaries of the region to raise their young in the peace and quiet of the summer months. But that tranquility is about to end. An unsuspecting group of narwhal swims near the shore. During their few summer weeks here, narwhal frolic at the surface more freely than at any other time of year. The bulls try to impress each other by showing off their tusks. They use them to establish who's the boss. But now they've got bigger problems to worry about. The orcas have made their way into this fjord, and they're in hunting formation. By the time the narwhal recognize the danger, it's too late. They're cornered. The orcas' perfectly coordinated maneuvers drive the narwhal closer to the shore. Trapping them in shallow water. Global warming has enabled this previously unknown hunting behavior in the orcas. As more and more pack ice melts into open sea during the summer, the indigenous wildlife of the Arctic will suffer more consequences. Polar bears use the ice as a base to hunt seals. During a thaw, they have to resort to other sources of food. The George River in northern Quebec. One of the largest migrations of Arctic animal life takes place here. The journey of the Arctic char. To spawn, they embark on a long inland voyage. In the process, they must overcome enormous obstacles. It's a merciless, arduous journey. And at the end of it lurks a new and unforeseen threat. Polar bears, famished and a little disoriented. The river and the flowering meadow are nothing like their usual frozen summer hunting grounds. One would expect to see scenes like this further south, with grizzlies and salmon. Polar bears differ from their brown-furred relatives. For one thing, they're clumsier. This thawed-out alien landscape forces the polar bears to develop completely new hunting skills. Most attempts fail, but sometimes one gets lucky. Polar bears have hardly ever been observed, let alone filmed while fishing. Maybe this is the future of the world's largest land predator. But nobody can tell whether the animals will be able to find enough food, as the periods without ice grow longer and longer. The melting poles and the expanding warm water are raising sea levels all over the world, with no end in sight. It could doom isolated flat land masses such as the Yap Islands in the middle of the West Pacific. In Yapese mythology, the sea is a goddess, a very jealous goddess. To appease her, the men don't spend the night with their wives before going out to sea, but with each other. This gives them time to repair their harpoons and discuss the latest events. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the men set off. The traditional canoes, some over 100 years old, can quickly reach the best fishing spots, even in low wind conditions. Below the water's surface, a world teems with plant and animal life. Powerful manta rays glide through the colourful coral gardens. But this splendour could soon fade. Throughout the tropics, rising water temperatures are causing widespread destruction of the corals. The Yap fishing waters have been spared, at least for now. The Yaps can continue their traditions. The people don jewellery as they prepare for a dance ceremony, a custom on the Pacific Islands since ancient times. The islanders seem unaware of the massive changes the world is facing, when extreme shifts in temperature will test the limits of our planet and challenge their way of life. Scorching heat or endless drought, exposed location or bitter cold. Life perseveres under even the most severe conditions. High in the mountains, in the depths of the sea, or somewhere in between. Every niche demands adaptations. In communication, in hunting, and in raising young. The span of a few meters can spell the difference between life and death. Yet evolution always finds sophisticated solutions to the pressures of life at the limits. The Atacama Desert in northern Chile, a remote, inhospitable world, almost like an alien planet. The dry plateaus are rugged, forbidding. At first glance, this region, marked by stony deserts and salt lakes, seems incompatible with life. and yet some creatures have taken a liking to it. In this demanding landscape, vicuñas, relatives of the llama, are remarkably undemanding. They roam several kilometers every day in search of food and water. Ponds that can quench their thirst year-round are hard to find. So is nutritious grass. It's a rare oasis that offers both. The paltry amount of water here is often salty. Microorganisms thrive in it, which suits the flamingos just fine. The birds use their beaks to filter out the tiny prey. On the plateau, water from the meager rainfall accumulates and feeds the Salar de Atacama, Chile's largest salt lake. But it won't last. The sun takes its toll. The water pulls minerals from the soil, then evaporates quickly, leaving nothing but crusty residue and salty ponds. Mighty volcanoes tower above the salt lakes, but the clouds that pile up on their flanks wring out scanty rainfall. Drought rules the Atacama. A completely different world lies beneath this heavy morning fog that cloaks all but a few treetops. The mountain forests of Sri Lanka overlook the rest of the country, like islands in the sea. The high zones are home to exotic species that live nowhere else in the world. The uppermost level of the tree canopy is the stamping ground of the montane purple-faced langur. They rarely make their way down to the ground, choosing to spend virtually their entire lives in the comparatively safe treetops, where tasty leaves are plentiful, and the branches and vines make a perfect playground for the little ones. A few of the youngsters show off their jumping skills to the older ones. Extremely swift and nimble climbers, these jungle dwellers are born acrobats. Some purple-faced langurs love leaping vigorously from branch to branch, while others prefer to take it slow. This resting bear monkey won't allow anything to disturb its tranquil mood. Its long, thick coat is an adaptation to Sri Lanka's cold and damp mountain world. The temperature can fall below freezing here. Only a cozy, warm coat will do. In the tree canopy, juicy leaves are everywhere, just waiting to be picked. But the choosy bear monkeys prefer a more exclusive feeding place. Every morning, they visit Sri Lanka's highest-lying flower garden, a delightful setting to indulge in culinary delicacies, like these mimosas. But even a mimosa brunch can be spoiled. A black eagle darkens the sky. Striking fear and panic among the monkeys. Brunch is cancelled. The eagle leaves hungry too. The monkeys can anticipate danger from above, but they steer clear of the forest floor, where the greatest hunter of these forests lurks, the Indian rock python. This giant snake can stretch more than 5 meters and uses its body to envelop and crush its prey. But for weeks, this female has coiled her body around her nest to keep it warm and protected. As soon as the scent of the eggs reveals they're about to hatch, the mother makes herself scarce. She hasn't eaten for weeks, and her hunting instincts threaten to overpower her. If she stays, she'll devour her own offspring. Now the nest is unprotected, but the big moment has arrived. Inside the eggs, the little ones begin their work. Using a temporary egg tooth, the hatchlings slice open the leathery covering. They sniff the air to find their bearings. For now, the tiny snakelets are vulnerable, but soon enough they'll be fearsome predators. Pythons are loners, and rivalry starts at an early age. Each snake needs its own territory. The hatchlings find shelter among the foliage and roots. Coverage is crucial, because a crested serpent eagle is always watching. And a freshly hatched python would make the perfect breakfast. Fortunately, the eagle has made other dining arrangements, so the baby snake is spared. Sri Lanka's wildlife flourishes from its forest floor to its lofty treetops. Unlike here, these majestic rocks exclude all but the most stubborn residents. These steep tabletop mountains, or tepuis, rise thousands of meters above the rainforests of Venezuela, Brazil, and Guyana. Hidden worlds flourish here. This is the only place where sun pitchers grow, a subspecies of the carnivorous pitcher plant. Sun pitchers use their tubular leaves and side seam to trap insects and rainwater, their source of essential nutrients in this poor soil. These botanical booby traps look unassuming, but they're perfectly suited to this extreme habitat. The steep walls of the tepuis force humidity up from the rainforest. Then it rains down in torrents. The incessant rain on the high plateaus presents a challenge to the sun pitchers. Unlike many of their relatives in temperate zones, they lack a lid to shield themselves. The rainwater threatens to overflow, washing away valuable nutrients. And yet, the water level in the pitcher drops even in a downpour. Thanks to a small hole in the pitcher that drains the excess water. The seam channels the water safely to the base of the plant and maintains the water level. The sun pitcher's ingenious adaptation and its minimal demand for nutrients enable it to live a life at the limits of the tepui's extreme environment. An imposing, flesh-hungry pitcher plant grows in the mountainous regions of Oregon and California. The cobra lily can reach a height of 1 meter. The mouth of the trap lies under a dome-like hood dotted with translucent windows. These windows deceive insects in a particularly insidious way. The fly can't resist the scent of sweet nectar wafting from the plant's opening. But as soon as it steps inside the tube, the fly's own instincts spell its doom. After eating its fill, it tries to fly out towards the light, but only slams against the slippery window of the hood and slides to its death. Cobra lilies are extreme worlds of their own, well adapted to high altitudes, but they're no mountain climbers. The Alps, in the heart of Europe. Rugged, impressive, majestic. And for almost 8 months a year, bitter cold, snowy and icy winter keeps a tight grip on the high Alpine zone. To survive here in the long term takes toughness and skill in navigating difficult terrain. Chamois have what it takes. Sure-footed and steady, they master the most precipitous terrain. Even facing the angry moods of an alpine winter, chamois go about their business. They stoically endure the snow and storms that shape their world. Only during mating season do their emotions run high. Bucks pit their strength against each other in high-speed chases across the steep slopes. They drive their weaker rivals before them, putting them in their place. Steep cliffs don't shake the chamois. But danger looms heavy on the snow-laden mountain. When nature unleashes its pent-up fury. The lucky ones find cover. The force of an avalanche's pressure wave alone can be fatal. But avalanches can also bring some benefits. The aftermath helps the common raven to survive the winter. Ravenous ravens are usually the first to spot the casualties. And like scouts, they lead other mountain dwellers to the carcasses. A hungry golden eagle spots the ravens and doesn't think twice about stealing their spoils. There's not very much the weaker crows can do. In the unforgiving alpine winter, the chamois carcass is a lifeline for the golden eagle. As the season grinds on, food grows scarce. The inhabitants do their best to make it to the warm season. At last, the spring thaw colors the meadows, but also sends avalanches thundering into the valley. Steep gullies channel the force of the heavy, wet snow. Then come weeks of rapids born of the snowmelt. As the long alpine winter finally comes to an end, the events of the next few months will be propelled by summer's warmth. The last snowfields attract chamois and their kids. They search for cooler temperatures and fresh grass. And an arena to let off some steam. For these master climbers, the steep cliffs of the high mountains present no obstacle. Pacific salmon, on the other hand, face obstacles their entire lives. Hundreds of millions of them ascend from the sea to the higher altitude mainland in Western Canada. The salmon migrate up the rivers to spawn, to the very same spot where they were born. Their delicate sense of smell helps them to find their way. The further they swim up the river, the more the current fights them. In some places, the river is too turbulent to swim against, but they don't give up. To make headway, the salmon leave the water and for a brief moment, they become flying fish. The salmon perform this tremendous feat, conquering the current level by level. The precision of their jumps and where they dive back in, these details determine life and death for each fish. To reach their spawning grounds, the salmon navigate a grueling obstacle course of strong currents, rocks and rapids. Instinct compels them. They keep swimming. But new dangers await them at every stage of their journey. Black bears find salmon irresistible. Their migration provides the bears relatively quick access to plenty of protein. For now, the salmon are strong and not so easy to catch. But bears are tenacious and won't be deterred. Bears tend to cherry-pick only the fattest parts of the fish. The leftovers decompose and nourish the trees, so they grow into exceptionally mighty specimens. The salmon furnish valuable nutrients for plants and animals during their migration, but their only goal is to get to the spawning grounds. Most of the sockeye salmon born in this riverbed 4 years ago did not survive, but those who've overcome the odds have now returned at last to mate. The females dig shallow cavities in the gravel where they lay their eggs. Then the males swim at their side and fertilize them. The next generation is assured, and the salmon that fought their way from sea level to the upper reaches of the river, metre by metre, have reached their goal. Far removed from the cold rivers of Western Canada lies the tropical island world of Palau. The Ice Age carved a unique marine lake here, in the middle of one of the islands. The few creatures that live here have developed in complete isolation. The lake is named after one of them, Jellyfish Lake. The crystal clear water teems with them. They survive only because of a pact they made, which forces them to take a death-defying journey every day. Inside their bodies, the jellyfish have taken in countless tiny roommates. Algae that turn sunlight into sugar. The sugar nourishes the jellyfish, and in turn, the jellyfish take care of the algae. They swim towards the sun. The spectacle begins at the light of dawn. With the first ray of sunshine, the jellyfish float eastwards. Their bells always face the light. The algae give the jellyfish their colour, and thus tens of millions of golden blobs glide along the surface of the lake. Menacing darkness embraces the edge of the lake near the shady shoreline. The jellyfish are blind, but they can sense the darkness and the danger lurking in the mangroves lining the banks. Wind and waves propel them towards this danger zone. Predators are already waiting for them. Little blennies nibble on the tentacles and drive the jellyfish into the waiting arms of deadly sea anemones. Once a jellyfish gets caught, the attack comes from all sides. Only the luckiest jellyfish could escape such a lethal embrace. At night, the jellyfish sink deeper and deeper into the most dangerous abysses of the lake. They head towards an oxygen-free layer of bacteria where dead organisms sink and decompose. The lair is a nutritious bonanza for the algae, but a deadly, toxic no-man's land for jellyfish. If they stay too long, they will die. The aim is to hold out just long enough to ensure that their passengers receive sufficient nourishment. Then the jellyfish emerge from the death zone and return to the surface where the dawn with its first rays of sunshine awaits. Far from the tropics, on a patch of sea ice near the coast of Quebec, spans the world's largest tidal range. At low tide, ice cliffs seem to sprout. When the tide sets in, the ice cliffs vanish. The force of 16 meters of tidal rise ruptures the ice, creating deadly traps everywhere. At the same time, the broad tidal range also creates hidden opportunities. In the middle of winter, Inuit hunters have difficulty finding seals or whales, their traditional prey. Instead, the Inuit defy temperatures of -40 degrees Celsius to get to a crucial place on the sea ice. The men know that during extremely low tide, the retreating sea forms solid caverns beneath the ice. It gives them access to the rich seabed. They have passed this knowledge down from generation to generation. The Inuit accept the peril of having tons of ice suspended just a few centimeters over their heads, even when the ice has started to melt. All this to harvest one very important food, thousands of nutritious mussels, enough to feed their families. They have to hurry. The tide returns in just over an hour. The sea ice starts to shift. Time's almost up. They must leave at once. If the cave fills with water, there's no way out. The ice closes quickly, sealing this chilling underworld. Deep canyons cut through desert mountains. Behind them lies a legendary lake. The Dead Sea. A tectonic shift produced the lowest lying lakeshore on Earth. This lake, which has no outlet, lies 428 meters below sea level and is steadily receding. Heat and drought produce salt islands and evaporation sculpts bizarre formations. This landscape in the Jordan Valley is an undeniably hostile place to live. Nevertheless, a busy transit route for migratory birds runs right through the middle. Twice a year, tens of millions of birds cross the valley, from Europe to Africa in winter and back again in spring. European white storks are among the travelers. These masterful gliders take advantage of the warmth that rises from the land. Carried by the thermals, the white storks fly over famous cities like Jerusalem, and glide over vast plains and lush green fields. The flocks of storks take advantage of the rising heat, which carries them like an express train into the sky. They know their flight routes instinctively. Just as many sea dwellers know their own travel routes. The sperm whale is the mightiest predator on Earth. And as a sea nomad, constantly on the move. The hunting grounds of the sperm whale lie in the eternal darkness of the deep sea, which no ray of sunlight ever penetrates. Sperm whales can spend up to 1 hour underwater before they emerge to breathe. Before their next dive, they fertilize the sea by eliminating waste. To save energy, organs that aren't vital for survival in the deep sea shut down, including the digestive tract. This is one of the rare occasions when nutrients from the ocean depths reach the surface. No other mammal can dive deeper than these giants, who only very rarely congregate in large schools. During their dives, sometimes more than 2 kilometers deep, they also hunt giant squid, some of their favorite prey. A single sperm whale can eat up to 1 ton of food in a single day. Researchers believe they stun their prey, using some of the loudest sounds in the animal kingdom. Much about these powerful marine mammals living in the darkness of the deep sea remains a mystery. The challenge of deep sea exploration. It's being tackled by scientists at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. They study animals that use light to survive in the deep ocean. Until recently, it was virtually impossible to collect live specimens of luminous or bioluminescent animals from the depths. A remote-controlled underwater robot changed that. These researchers troll the depths for new forms of life and to find out why so many varieties of living light have developed here. In the control room, thousands of meters above, the crew navigates through a menagerie of alien-like creatures.
Nice.
But in reality, the robot is the alien in this strange world. The glow of the spotlight reveals exotic animals. Though the robotic divers' cameras are highly sensitive, they can't see everything. To truly investigate the bioluminescence, the researchers have to bring their catch to the surface. Rare creatures such as the vampire squid are carefully sucked into the remote-controlled containers.
Damn. Yes.
A viperfish.
Perfect.
And even a dragonfish. Their name isn't the only thing reminiscent of sea monsters. Dragonfish certainly look the part. One of the few live dragonfish ever witnessed. And one of even fewer that have been caught alive.
Yes! Yay! Oh my God.
Once the team gathers the deep-sea creatures thousands of meters above their natural habitat, they must act quickly. The enormous differences in pressure will dim the animal's luminosity. In the brief time they have, the researchers investigate the type of luminescence and its possible functions. In some species, the light seems to serve as a form of defense. Like the rotating flashes of the Atolla jellyfish. Or the light waves of the Burroe jellyfish. Whatever purpose, the creatures make a fascinating sight. an adaptation to blind or to beguile. The bizarre eyes of the barrel-eye fish gaze upwards. Through the transparent top of its head, it keeps an eye out for prey. It is an extraordinarily rare creature and a remarkable ambassador of its deep-sea realm. The same holds true for the cockeyed squid. This cephalopod has one normal eye and one special but peculiar upward-looking eye. Only the extraordinary creatures of the deep sea can navigate this domain of darkness. Thousands of meters above, a spectacular mountain world awakens with the first light of day. Monks summon the faithful to morning prayer. A place full of myth and adventure. The roof of the world, with its backdrop of majestic peaks. Every year, bold expeditions attract summiteers to the highest of all 8,000ers. To stand on the peak of Mount Everest is their lofty goal. Yak caravans and hundreds of Sherpas move to the base camps at the foot of Everest to supervise expeditions from all over the world. Past breathtaking ice towers, one leg of the expedition climbs from 5,300 to 6,400 meters above sea level. Anyone planning to conquer this mountain has to take the time to acclimatize to the thin air. Inclement weather, or the lack of a go-ahead from the authorities, can force expeditions to remain in the advanced base camps for weeks. Each in his own way, the trekkers try to ride out the nerve-wracking wait. Once the climbers get the all clear, they head up to the North Col at an altitude of around 7,000 meters. The route leads over glacial crevasses and then steeply upwards. The local Sherpas, considered the most capable mountaineers, adapt their speed to the ability of their chargers. Stationary ladders help to clear the wide gaps. On a day when everything runs perfectly, the mountain reveals its breathtaking beauty. Having reached the North Col, there is no time to rest, because at this altitude the weather can change in the blink of an eye. Only a few coves provide a modicum of shelter for the tents. At the North Col's elevation, the jet streams have free rein. Peak wind speeds can exceed 150 kilometers per hour in the summer. Then, only the camps provide safety. As soon as the wind subsides at night, hectic activity begins in the base and high camps. In complete darkness, the first mountaineers head towards the summit. The timing is different for each group. Some stay in the high camps waiting for news of better weather from the meteorologists. For others, the decision has already been made. The ascending routes to the high camps see constant coming and going. The first groups to take advantage of favorable weather are already on their way back. Those forced by the wrenching storm and biting cold to hold out in tents in the death zone at 8,000 meters must make tough decisions. Every step towards the summit demands maximum physical and mental stamina. Many attempt to tackle the 8,848 meter elevation, but few succeed. For many alpinists, standing on the top of Mount Everest is the summit of their career, the realization of a life's dream. Scientists, too, are often drawn to dizzying heights, and some experience true moments of glory there. In the Atacama Desert in the Chilean Andes, we end our journey of life at the limits back where we began it. The region is considered the driest on Earth. ALMA, the world's largest observatory, is perched on the Chajnantor Plateau, 5,000 meters above sea level. From here, 66 radio telescopes eavesdrop on the infinite expanse of space. The advantages of this location are clear. This remote mountainous region is hardly impacted by the Earth's atmosphere or man-made interference. From the Chilean Andes, astronomers reach new heights of space exploration. With the Hubble Space Telescope, scientists can also peer deep into the cosmos. In nebulae and on remote planets near distant stars, they search for the mysterious origins of life. The very life that has evolved on Earth. Life lived at the limits, making use of every tiny niche on our planet. And life that ultimately triumphs over the dizzying heights and profound depths of our extreme world.